Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm talking about Final Fantasy XVI's arcade mode because it has been a hot minute since I talked about it. Now, when Final Fantasy XVI first came out, arcade mode was one of the things I was looking forward to most. Basically, you replay through each stage of the game, and you just try to get a really high score based on how well you perform, using lots of different attacks, being incredibly stylish, avoid getting hit, beat monsters in special ways. All sorts of things go into it, and it even has a difficulty above what's available in the game itself, in that of Ultimaniac. All of these things sounded great, especially with the leaderboards for these points. You could compete against other people. Unfortunately, the execution left me a little wanting. While the remixed waves and the difficulty of Ultimaniac were definitely welcome, and honestly, I wish I could have played through the base game with that level of difficulty, it wasn't really enough to overcome the actual problems with scoring in that mode. Now, while Final Fantasy mode scoring was mostly okay, Ultimaniac's was down to needing to play really slow and to just farm points with all of your weakest attacks. So it got so far away from being about style and all about optimization by just sitting in stages for 1, 2, 3+ hours, dodging and using your weakest moves, and it was a test of patience and not a test of skill at all. Quite frankly, it was lame, and that is the opposite of what this should have been. My disappointment was palpable, and I'm sure you could tell that by now. However, not far into the game's release, they said they were actually going to be retooling arcade mode to better envision what it should have been. Now, they did do an update a while back where they adjusted the points of that mode, and I was originally going to make a video about it then, but just kind of didn't. I knew they weren't done working on arcade mode. They said this was only the first of several updates they were going to do to it, so I decided to wait a little bit. Now, with Echoes of the Fallen's DLC out and the second arcade mode update out, I think now I can talk about it a little bit more. Is it better? Does it still need some work? Or has it not changed at all? Let's talk about it. So like I said, their goal with the arcade mode updates was to make it more engaging and prevent those slowed down strategies. Now, in the 2 updates that they've done a couple of things in order to make that better achieved. And both of these things were incredibly simple. For one, they added time limits and time bonuses. So you have now a set amount of time you're allowed to take on a stage, so you cannot farm it indefinitely. But on top of that, there's actually multiple different thresholds for the amount of time you have remaining when you clear. If you beat a mission fast enough, you get a higher multiplier than if you kind of play it close to the edge. So you really want that multiplier at the end of it all. So realistically, your time limit for scoring well is way lower than just your time limit to beat the mission overall. This, of course, encourages you to do your best to farm points within the restricted time limit that you have, but also to make sure that you're doing so in a method that's not too slow. So you kind of have to balance the two together now. However, more importantly, they added a technical bonus that is increased by frequently changing up moves and maintained in a similar fashion. Basically ripped right from the Devil May Cry technical bonus that you may be used to that tells you when you're being stylish. These 2 things in tandem go a long way into making the mode better, and they aren't the only things that they did, just the only things you can really see on the surface. They did also completely have to recalculate what actually constituted an S ranking, and thus the point values are way higher now than they were when the initial scoring system came out. The multipliers and the technical bonus just make for bigger numbers. Now, on paper, that sounds like all they would need to do, as long as it's balanced correctly. So what was the actual result? Well, I tested a whole bunch of stages, including the Echoes of the Fallen level itself, which is one giant stage that I did on Ultimaniac, and I judged all the different scoring of all the different types of waves, and it was a really good kind of overall example, even before I really understood how to maximize the new scoring system. So generally, the waves of mobs you may encounter in a stage seem to be better balanced. There are times where I absolutely massacre those stages, but I maintain a high technical bonus in the very short time, and I actually managed to get an S rank. There's one in particular where I Zantetsukened way earlier than I probably should have. In fact, I shouldn't have even been using Zantetsuken in order to score, in my opinion, still, but I still managed an S rank because my level of play was just well enough. I got that technical bonus quick. I made sure that my technical bonus was being multiplied by the Zantetsuken hits, and that was enough to score. I found that regularly when I just kind of performed really safe, I still got B rankings with the occasional A, and ones where I screwed up by missing the Cure and Protects and not stopping those, or ones where I instantly KO a whole wave with a Zantetsuken still resulted in a C. I think that's proper. Zantetsukening a wave is considered kind of like a cheat button. This is true in the base game where it completely disengages you from the game systems by allowing you to basically one-shot almost anything on any difficulty. Still remains true in Ultimaniac, but you will not score well if you do that. It still makes as a useful tool, maybe, if you use it as the very last thing before all of the enemies die, instead of using it to initially eliminate the wave. But that's up to you if you even care about the scoring or if you just want to clear through the stage. However, when it came to bosses, these seem to require a lot more strategy when scoring on these difficulties. I would feel really good about how I was scoring against the boss, and as I practiced more and more, I managed to bring that average score up and up by changing around my abilities and doing things entirely different than the way I was used to playing the game. That's good. I should want to experiment with the game like that, and that's exactly what arcade mode needs to engage. In fact, I would argue the entire game should engage that a lot more than it probably does. That being said, I did feel as though the bosses still require a pretty high bar in order to maintain an S. Even if you hold that really high technical ranking the entire time, it can be very difficult without a very precise set of skills to actually get to those A and S rank scores. This was especially evident in the Garuda encounter, where I honestly at some point was like, I don't know what I could do better, until I thought of something, and it didn't just gradually got better and better as I tried new things. And honestly, I think I know how I could pretty reliably get an S rank on that mission. But it can be kind of initially frustrating. It can initially seem like the scoring system is still a little busted, but it just requires a different understanding of how to actually achieve them now. Being able to do lots of accolades, making sure you still kill it quickly, but not too quickly. You want to actually still draw those boss fights out just a little bit. You want to be able to get a lot of points by mixing things up frequently. You want to make sure that if there's multiple targets, you're actually getting, if you're using skills that get bonuses for hitting multiple targets, that you actually achieve those most of the time. All of those things come into play, and that is what style is. It's making the best out of every situation to the best of your ability with unrelenting offense. And that's not to say that the moves that we used to use for stalling out the levels really long, that's not to say they're useless. They really don't generate a lot of points, and they don't really increase the technical gauge by all that much, but they are very quick, often have low cooldowns, and can still be really good for holding the technical gauge where it is between your other abilities. Remember, the technical gauge benefits from you actually using different skills frequently, so a skill that holds it still but doesn't really do any damage can be just as valuable as you're holding out for skills that will generate a lot of points that maybe just deal a little bit more damage. I still didn't really get too used to them, but I feel like Rift Slip and a lot of the Odin abilities will still be incredibly useful in this new mode. One thing that I found was instrumental in increasing my points as I understood it more and more was actually Bahamut skills. Now, I initially tried Impulse, and I found that it maybe did a little bit too much damage. That could have just been in conjunction with my other skills, but I ended up moving towards Mega Flare and Satellite both, as they allowed for constant uptime while performing other attacks. And this is crucial because you're constantly resetting the value on the technical meter by using different attacks. When you're spamming Satellite the entire time in between doing other combos or other icon skills, then that ability to generate or even maintain technical rank is constantly being reset because of using those other skills. Mega Flare also just provides such a long period of actually hitting the enemy that it allows you to maintain it, and they both kind of achieve the same thing in tandem. So that was really the biggest value thing that I learned, and I'm not much of a Bahamut user other than the Giga Flare, which everybody uses, let's be honest. One thing that was definitely annoying, and this was actually what led me to discover the thing with Bahamut, was the Garuda Claw ability. Now, if you're just using it to scale an enemy, you know, when you do it point blank and it launches you into the air, maintains your ability in the air, that's great because that's going to mix up the use of your skills. That allows you to do some additional jumps, and with some of the new masteries that you have on the skills, you can get a ton of jumps on an opponent, and the jumps themselves count towards a technical bonus. So there's all sorts of ways you can do things like mix-ups and maintain aerial attacks and bonuses combined with magic bursts and ground slams and all that stuff that feel very, very engaging and do reward a great deal of points. But when you actually use the Garuda skill to do the pull animation, it gives you a little bit of technical meter, but it then degrades way faster than the animation, especially on some of the bosses that have like really, really long pull animations from the Garuda skill. Deadly Embrace was just, it was kind of scary, and Deadly Pull, it wasn't something that I felt like was really valuable because I was losing more technical meter than I was gaining. That is why I decided to try Mega Flare and Satellite, because if I had a Mega Flare running from the Bahamut dodge, or if I had Satellite up, I could keep the technical meter going while doing the Deadly Pull. So those were just a lot of little things and interactions that at first seemed a little annoying, but they forced me to think about them in a different way. And again, that's the experience I find valuable in arcade mode. So all in all, the arcade mode has come a long way. You can reasonably just tackle Ultimaniac for its difficulty while still actually scoring well, even if you're more focused on the completion of the stage in Ultimaniac and less on the actual scoring. You just won't get an A or an S rank, most likely. Maybe your setup just happens to be really good right off the bat. That being said, there's still a few things that maybe they could nuance to make a little bit better. There's still a big problem with actually displaying accolades. I should be able to check accolades outside of just the result screen menu. I should be able to see all the special objectives that I can go for, but there's really no good way of viewing things like that in the game. This was a problem when it came out, and it's still a problem now. And that's a big thing I really think they should adjust before the PC version comes out. And another thing I just kind of have a major gripe with is the Cure and Protect skills. So basically, if any of the enemies that can cast heals or supportive abilities manage to finish casting them, except for Hearthflame, which is a new one, I don't think that reduced points at all. It sets your points to 0 for the entire stage that you're on. And keep in mind that one level is made up of a bunch of different individual stages. I think I'm getting the terminology wrong, but all the same, you essentially get graded multiple times, and then that all adds up to the end. But if a cure goes off, that entire section of your progress just goes to 0, and then you have to rebuild it. That's just, I don't know. I don't mind punishing the successful use of those. I don't mind reducing a little bit of points, but you could be at like 12 million and then one cure goes off and you're at 0. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bit excessive. Now, I'm not saying you'll be at 12 million. I'm not saying that's a legitimate example, but you get the point. It doesn't care how much progress you've made or how good you've looked up to that point. It deems you just an absolute failure if it ever goes off. And some waves can be pretty annoying to get to those mobs right away on the get-go and still be stylish about it. Now, I'm not saying it's bad for it to be difficult to do. I just think that's overly punishing. I'd sooner the point total on waves like that be more dependent on interrupting it because you get bonuses for doing it and not just strip you of everything. So another bit of feedback, reduce the amount of points lost when a cure or a protect goes off, or make it so that you get accolades for those that act as really solid multipliers to encourage people to go out of their way to do it. I think either of those options are good, but 0 points to me just seems like it's a bit excessive. However, if you were holding off on arcade mode because you heard how bad the point scoring system was and you didn't want to mess around with it at all, if you're willing to experiment around a little bit, then honestly, I think it's in a pretty good spot at the moment. There's definitely some abilities that are more or less useful, and so it may still feel a bit restrictive as to what you can actually bring, but at least you're not sitting there for 4 hours trying to use the weakest skills imaginable, or at the very least, you are only waiting X amount of time while trying to use weak skills. I feel like drawing out the clock, as long as you don't lose the technical meter, is probably still a very, very important thing to do. But I digress. I haven't dived into it that much, and I haven't looked at what the top scores are looking like. I just hope that when I do finally Google it, it isn't still those ultra slow missions that, just completely forego everything else. I just don't want it to be that. I hope that they're at least delaying it while holding a 3 times technical bonus, and that it comes down to it just being effective to hold that and not to I just don't want to sit there, man. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for my updated review on the arcade mode for Final Fantasy XVI. Hopefully you get a little bit more fine-tuning, and then the PC people can really enjoy it thoroughly. I can promise you that if by the time the PC version comes out, it's not all the way fixed, somebody will probably mod it to fix it. Let's be honest. Anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and when I got more 16 news, you know where to find it. Anyway, until next time, take care.